Hello there, my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make these Starry kumihimo bracelets. So we're using GemDuos or DiamonDuos to create the stars that are incorporated into the kumihimo braid itself. And I'm also going to show you how we make the button and loop closure for this bracelet. So if you want to learn how to make it, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we're going to need. Now first of all, I have my kumihimo disc here, and this is the round one, and I'm just using the mini disc just to have the least cord wastage, but of course you can use the mini or the regular one. And then of course we need our cords to make the braid, so I have a few different ones, but the first one here is a 1mm satin cord, and I'm just using this lovely burgundy colour. And also for the braid, I've got this S-Lon cord here. Again, I'm using this burgundy colour to match the satin cord nicely. I kind of like these two to match as much as possible. But of course, you can choose to use a different colour. That's completely up to you. And then finally, I have a thread. Now this thread is going to be used after we made the braid. So I'm going to be using this obviously alongside the beading needles as well to basically work with the braid and create the final piece once we've made it. And then as for the beads that are going to be incorporated into the braid, I'm using these GemDuos here, which are going to create the kind of starry pattern. So whether it's GemDuos or DiamonDuos, it doesn't really matter. It's going to be the same result. And for them, I'm just using the silver colour. Now the other beads that I have here are some 11 Miyuki seed beads. And these specific ones are galvanized blush. And these beads here are going to be along the edge of the bracelet. You can also choose to leave these out if you prefer. And finally there I have a shank button. So this specific one is just a heart-shaped metal shank button. So you can see on the back we have a little loop there. And I'm going to use this basically as part of the clasp. So obviously what kind of button you want to use is completely up to you. And what I'm going to do is leave the material list and any links you might need in the description box down below, so you can go there and have a look. Otherwise, let's get all the materials ready and let's get started. So then we need to cut some lengths of our cord, and what I have here is 4 lengths of my satin cord, and then I also have 4 lengths of the S-Lon cord. So like I said, these are all going to be used for the braid, and all of these lengths are about 1 meter and 25 centimeters each. What I've then done is put all the ends together on one end, and then I just tied a knot to hold all the cords together there, and this is our starting point that we then need to attach to our disc. So I'm grabbing my disc here, and then I'm taking my cords and putting this knot down through the hole in the center, and I'm just grabbing hold of it with my fingers on the back here. And then we need to just distribute these cords. So I'm just kind of looking at the numbers as a bit of a reference here. In this case, obviously, it also has lines and arrows, but what I'm going to do is just start with the satin cords. I'm going to place 1 in the top slot, so basically number 1. Then I'm going to place 1 right opposite, on the opposite side there, so below, opposite it. And then I'm going to place 1 on the left here, straight out to the side. And the last one, just separating that out from the rest, is going to be opposite the one we just placed, straight on the other side there. So basically we have 4 quartered on the disc. And again, I'm just using the numbers for reference, so I have kind of, that's going to be the first cord is in number 1 there. Then all the S-Lon cords here, they basically need to be placed in the same way, but just in between the satin cord. So I'm going to take one first, go right in the middle in between these 2 cords. So just grab your cord here, find the one that's naturally kind of coming towards that direction. Grab that one, go right in between, in the middle between the 2 cords on this side, and the same with the rest. So we have them literally in between all of them, but again quartered on the disc, so just off from each other, just like this. And then I have all my cords attached to the disc, and the lengths here in the slots on the outside of the disc are obviously what we're going to now then start making the braid with. So I'm just going to start showing the structure of the braid, and I also want to make a little section before I start adding in any beads. So where we just have the braid with only the cord. So again, I'm keeping hold of the cords or the knot down here below the disc. Now right now obviously there's not a lot to grab hold of, but the braid will grow, and I'm going to keep kind of holding it underneath the disc with my fingers like that on the back. So as for the braid structure itself, it's pretty simple. It's just a matter of kind of remembering the exact order of doing it. So again, that's kind of just going to be created by a routine. So what I'm going to do is start with my satin cords. So I'm going to move all the satin cords first. So I'm just starting at the very top. Like I said, that's kind of the first cord is the number 1 there. I'm going to release that, bring it straight over the middle down to the bottom satin cord there. I'm then going to release the bottom satin cord, place the first one into that slot, the same slot, and then bring that bottom one over the middle up to the top and placing that into the same slot that the top one was in. So right in that middle slot in between these other 2 cords. So basically these 2 are just literally swapping places. So I grabbed the top one down and then I released that and brought it up. And then they've, like I said, swapped places like this. So that's the first 2 satin cords. I then need to turn my disc a quarter basically, because I need to move the other 2 satin cords. Same movement. I'm releasing the top one, bringing that down, and I kind of like to hold it to the right of this bottom cord that I then release. I then replace that with the top one and then bring the bottom one up and place it into the empty slot on the top. Again, the very same one. So again, these have also literally just swapped places with each other in the exact same movement. I'm then going to turn my disc again, and I'm turning it in a clockwise direction here. Now I'm turning the disc. We've literally now moved all the satin cords, and now I'm going to get to the S-Lon cords, and I'm literally now just turning to the very next cord that I'm going to run into, which is an S-Lon. So I just had my disc like this. I'm turning it just enough to go to the next S-Lon there. Then I release that top one, bring that down, again keeping it to the right, release the bottom one, then replace the top one into that bottom one, and then bring the bottom one up. And that is the exact same movement we've done as we did with the satin cords. So as you can see, it's pretty basic and simple technique. It's just kind of remembering the order of doing it. So that's 2 of the S-Lon cords. We have the other 2 left, which means I'm going to turn my disc further until in the same direction until we then run into those cords. So again, that's a quarter in this case. Release the top cord, bring that down into the bottom slot once you release that bottom one, and then bring that up into the top. And now we've moved all the S-Lon cords as well. And as you can see, all the cords are in the same positions. And basically we've done 1 full round now. So 1 full movement, we've literally moved all the cords. So that means now I'm going to keep turning my disc in the same direction, because we need to now basically just repeat. We're going to repeat these steps over and over, and that's going to then create the braid. Which means, just to show you again, I'm still not adding in any beads, but I'm going to then start the next round, which is from number 1, releasing that cord, bring it down, replace it with the bottom one, and bring that up. And then I'm doing all the satin cords first, remember that. So go turn your disc in the same direction, straight to the next pair of satin cords, and then same movement. Make the cords swap places, and then turn your disc for the S-Lon cords. So just turn it till you run into the first one. So that's just a slight turn in the same direction. Top one comes down into the bottom slot, which then goes up into the top slot. Turn a quarter for the next pair of S-Lon cords. So we make sure to use all of them. And now that is 1 more complete full round. I'm then going to turn my disc. So I basically can start again for the next round with that number 1 cord. And this is how you build the braids. So like I said, I'm going to do this for a bit until we have a bit of a length here, before we then start adding beads in. So I now continue for a bit here, and then we can start to see the braid coming out on the back. It looks a bit something like this. Now what I've got here is roughly about 5 centimeters or so of braid. It's just an estimate. We don't need that much really. So that's going to be good enough to then be able to finish off with at the end. So now what we need to do is continue making the braid obviously, but I'm now going to also start adding beads in. So I'm just going to show you how I do that and also the pattern to it. So first of all, I'm going to start the braid. So the next round here, in the exact same way, I'm going to start with the satin cords. So the top one comes down and replaces the bottom one, which replaces straight back into the top one. Turn for the next pair of the satin cords. So I'm not adding any beads to the satin cords because that's what the S-Lon cords are there for, because obviously they are thinner, so they're going to be able to go through the beads more easily, which means I'm going to now swap to the first pair of S-Lon cords, because I've used all the satin cords, and these are the ones I'm going to add in my beads on. So that means also, of course, we need to get our beads ready. So I have my seed beads handy, and I also have my GemDuos or DiamonDuos, and I'm just going to add them as we go into the pattern that we need. So before I release this top S-Lon cord, I'm going to add, first of all, find the very end of the cord there, and then I just want to add on one of my seed beads onto that, and I'm going to let it drop all the way down the cord. Now obviously for now, because we're just starting out, the cords are quite long still, but just take your time to work with them. Keep untangling them as well if you need to. Then let it drop all the way down the cord, and as I release it, I'm going to make sure it drops all the way into the middle there, and then before I bring the cord over, it's going to sit on that side and make sure it stays there as we're bringing the cord down. You can see it stays on that side, and I place it into the slot on the bottom there, and the bead needs to stay on that top side of the braid, and the bottom one, again, I've released that because obviously we need to place the other cord into that slot, but here I'm going to add a bead as well, but this is going to be one of the GemDuos or DiamonDuos. Now what you'll find is that there's kind of a front and a back to these beads, so we also want to make sure we add them in the correct order. So I basically always make sure that it's laying on the back so the front is facing us, and then I'm going to take the cord and always put it through the left side as it's laying on the back. So I'm going to do that throughout the braid, so we make sure that the front of the bead is always facing in the same direction all the way along the braid. So that's the main thing, because the two sides are different from each other. The back is more flat and the front is kind of almost a little bit faceted, you could say, or has some shape to it. But then once that bead is added, I'm going to then let that drop all the way down. Just pick up the disc here in the correct position, and then again this bead needs to drop down into the middle, and then I pull over the cord to the top, but making sure that that bead stays on the bottom side of the braid and kind of sticks out like that. So we've now added beads to these two cords. So basically we've added the beads we need to in this round. I'm then turning my disc for the two remaining S-Lon cords, and here I'm just going to move them in the same way as all the other times, and I'm not adding beads into these. So that is now the complete round. I'm turning my disc continuously in the same direction to basically get to the first cord again to be able to start the next round. So I've now added my first 2 beads in, and like I said, in this case here I've added the seed bead and then also one of the GemDuos. Now continuing, I'm going to do the next round. So first of all, start with the satin cords, the first pair and then the second pair, and then do the S-Lon cords. Now in this case here, what I'm going to be doing throughout is the seed beads, so the little tiny beads here, I'm going to be adding every single time in the pattern here until we get to kind of the middle of the braid, but we'll get to that. So that means, let me just get to the end of this card. And get the bead on the cord, let it drop all the way down, and then we've released the cord there like normal. Make sure that that bead goes right down into the middle and it stays on that side before bringing the cord down and into the bottom slot after we release the other cord. And now this round is the first one after we added in a GemDuo on the previous one. Now I'm not going to add a GemDuo into this one because that would be too close to the first one. So what we need to do is create a bit of spacing between the GemDuos within the braid. So I did a round where I added a GemDuo in, and the next round here I'm not adding a GemDuo, only a seed bead. So we've done one round after the GemDuo was added in with only a seed bead added, and starting the next round now after that, do the satin cords first, and then as I'm getting to the S-Lon cords, this is the pair here, the first pair of S-Lon cords is where I add the beads. This is the second round after the round where we added the GemDuo in, and this is going to be the same as the previous one where I only add, oops, almost ran away from me, I only add a seed bead, and let that drop all the way down to the top cord here, the same cord that I'm adding all the seed beads to. Let it drop down, replace the bottom one, and again I'm not adding a GemDuo to this round. So this is now the second round after the round we added the GemDuo in, where I'm not adding a GemDuo, only a seed bead, and just finish off this round here. And then turn the disc to start a new round, same way, satin cords first, and then just like all the other times, the top one gets, just get to the end of it here, the top one gets, if I can get it on, one of the tiny seed beads, into the middle, and the bottom one here we did a round where we added a GemDuo, then we've done 2 rounds where we didn't add a GemDuo but only a seed bead. This is the third round after the first GemDuo now, and I'm going to now add a GemDuo again. So basically we're creating a spacing of 2 rounds in between the GemDuos for now. Again, making sure it's laying flat, and I'm then putting the cord through on the last side there just to kind of have some consistency and a routine of doing it. Let this drop all the way down in the middle, and then bring the card on, making sure the beads stay on the correct size where we want them to, sides. And then of course kind of just secure it a bit more in place by doing the last pair of the S-Lon cards, like that. Now if we can kind of just see a little bit here in the back, we created some spacing between the GemDuos because we need that for when we're going to start kind of bringing them together in the final pattern, but obviously we're making the whole braid first. So that's the spacing between that we need. So 2 rounds in between the GemDuos there. So that's finished that round. Start the next round, and basically what we need is, because we just added a GemDuo in, I'm now going to do another 2 rounds without a GemDuo, but do remember the seed bead if you're obviously using those, and then we're going to add in 1 more GemDuo. So I'm going to end up with 3 GemDuos here, kind of next to each other, but with the spacing of 2 rounds in between each other. So just get to that point. So now let's have a little look on the back here. So you can see I've ended up with 3 GemDuos in my braid. And obviously I'll continue with the seed beads all the way every time we do a round. And the GemDuos have equal spacing between them of 2 rounds. And we have 3 here. So this is the point where I'm kind of going to separate them out in groups like this. So I have 3 GemDuos added with 2 spacings between them. Now what I'm going to do is obviously start another round, and in this case here what we're going to do is work in groups of 3 GemDuos, you could say. So I have my first 3, so that means now what I'm going to do is for the next GemDuo I'm going to add, instead of having 2 rounds in between without a GemDuo, but obviously with a seed bead, I'm going to add 3, or I'm going to do 3 rounds instead. So basically create just a bit more spacing before the next round with the GemDuo. So again, I'm just reaching the S-Lon cord. I'm going to add a seed bead. Let that drop all the way down as all the other times. So like I've mentioned a few times already, I'm adding a seed bead for each round here, even when I'm not adding a GemDuo. So let that drop down, replace the cards. Again, no GemDuo on this round because this is the first round after the previous round where I did add a GemDuo. And just complete the round and then turn the disc, ready for the next round. So there with the number 1 card. So like I said, just to show you again, I have 3 GemDuos. That's kind of going to act as one group together with 2 rounds in between each GemDuo. Now after the last one I'm going to make 3 rounds now. So I've done the first one. I need to do another 2 rounds to get 3 rounds without a GemDuo. And then we need to start adding GemDuos in again. So now I've done those 3 rounds with no GemDuo on it. Then I'm going to start the next round. So do the satin cards first. All of them. And then, like every other round so far, I'm going to add a seed bead to the first S-Lon card here, now that we reached them. And let it drop all the way down as I'm releasing the card. Have the bead going to the middle. And here, you might have guessed, we did 3 rounds without a GemDuo. So now I want to start the next group of the 3 GemDuos. So obviously, this round I want to add 1. And again, making sure it's the same direction as all the others that I've added. So get the cord through the side of the bead, or one hole in the bead rather. And then as that's dropping down into the middle, that's going to sit on the side again. Bring the cord up and then just finish off this round by doing the last pair as well. So now we've done a round where we added in a GemDuo, and we've reached this next group of GemDuos that we're doing. So that means we now need to add 3 GemDuos in this group, you could say. And within the groups, I'm doing 2 rounds between the GemDuos, just like in the first group there. We have 2 rounds between these 3, and then between the third and the fourth one, because the 3 first ones are one group, there's 3 rounds. And then I'm going to do another group of 3 with 2 between them. So that's basically the pattern that we're doing here. So you just want to continue doing that until we have 1/2 of the braid done. So now I kept going and I have my length of braid. The very last round that I just did here, I added both a seed bead and a GemDuo into. So basically what we have now is 1/2 of the bracelet. So this is the braid I've got so far. You can see I've got my groups of 3 GemDuos. First one, second one, third, fourth, fifth, and I've done 6 groups in total. Now what we reach now, like I said, because this is the first half of the bracelet, we reach the point where I want to make the loop for the button. So we can obviously use the button as a clasp. So that's going to be made from the braid here. So, like I said, I just added a GemDuo on my last one and a seed bead. Now what I want to do is a length of braid that's going to fit the size we need to create the loop for the button. And I'm going to do that without adding any beads. Of course, you can add the seed bead still if you want to. I'm just going to be doing it without. So literally just continuing creating the braid in the same technique. So the satin cord first. But when I get to the S-Lon, I'm just going to move the cord without adding beads in. And the next ones. And that is 1 full round again. So just continue like this, and then obviously when you have a length of braid here that's going to create the loop, you can test it against your button, and then you want to just have a little bit extra as well. So now I've done a decent length here. I just want to flip it over, and like I said, I'm then going to take my button and I just want to kind of test it here. So I'll put the part obviously that were made for the loop, so without any beads, together towards the ends there, and create that loop and make sure the size is right for the button to go through. Now obviously you don't want to make it too large because the button can easily fall out, but you also don't want to make it too small. You obviously want to be able to have it go through. And then we just need to make sure obviously that the button fits and that we just have enough on either end there that the ends meet up and can be kind of closed up next to each other before we then start out with the beads there. So this size seems to be pretty good. And then basically I can just flip it back around. We just want to pick back up again. So I've now done the length that I need for the loop, and now what I want to do is the other half of the braid. So basically the length that we've just made, obviously minus the loop, but this whole length with beads on, we want to then repeat. So that means you just want to now start adding beads in again in the exact same pattern. So start the next round, do the satin cords first, and then when you get to the S-Lon cords, add your seed bead, and then obviously start with a GemDuo or DiamonDuo as well. And then you just want to do the exact same pattern and do the same amount of groups. So in this case here, I've got my 6 groups of 3 of the GemDuos. So I just want to repeat the exact same thing and then we end up with the full length of the braid that we need. So now I've finished this half of the braid as well. So I've got all my groups of the GemDuos there, the same amount as the half we did before, that midpoint with no beads on at all. And basically what I just want to do now is just finish off the braid. So if you remember, we started out the braid by just making the braid with no beads, so I'm going to do the same again here. So the last round I added both a seed bead and a GemDuos, so now I'm just going to make some braid here, continue the same technique without adding in any beads. So again, we just need a little length, just about the same as the other end of the braid. Then once we've done that length without the beads, we can remove the braid from the disc because we're done making the braid here. Now obviously we just need to make sure it's not going to unravel because this end is still open. So what I like to do is the cords that I was due to use next here, in this case I'm going to start a new round. I take those two cords that are opposite each other from that pair there, and I bring them across the middle, I tie a knot, and then tighten that down on top of the end of the braid and pull it nice and tight. Then I take the other two satin cords that are opposite each other and do the same thing across the middle and tie a knot and tighten that down at the end of the braid on top of the other knot, so like that. And then I do the same with the S-Lon cords. So I grab the two opposite each other, tie a knot across the middle, and now because these cords are thinner, I like to tie another knot with them. So again, across the middle, and just tighten that on top of the previous one, because otherwise it'll be easily coming undone. And of course just the last ones as well. So we're just tying knots on top of each other here, just to basically secure the end in place. And making sure to use all the cords. Tie that knot, and then again, just repeat with another one. So it's not gonna unravel like if we just did the one. Make sure it's nice and tight. And now I can remove my disc. And we have our braid. So if we go to that midpoint where I didn't add beads, and then because we did the two halves, it's gonna either end, the opposite ends there of the braid are going to be opposite each other and create either side of the final bracelet. So that part in the middle without beads is going to end up being the loop like that. Now obviously this is then what we need to start working with now. So that will be the next step. So this is where we then need to cut a length of our thread that we need to use, and it's really up to you how long you want this to be, because it all depends what you're comfortable working with. Now I prefer to try and use one length for the whole piece so I don't have to add more thread, but you can do that, so use shorter length and then add more if you need to. Now again, I'm using about a wingspan or something times 2, because what I've done is the length of thread here is I've added a needle to both ends of the thread. So in other words, it's going to be doubled up or doubled over. And I've also then pulled a long length through the needle. So it's kind of doubled over there through each needle, which makes it shorter to work with. And obviously we can release more thread as we then need it. So again, prepare your thread, cut the length you're comfortable working with, and then add a needle to either end here. Then I'm going to grab my braid here, because we need to start obviously kind of sewing all this together so it becomes one final piece. Now I'm going to start from the midpoint here, so I'm basically doubling or folding over my braid in half, and like I say, because here is going to be the loop, so this is the point I'm starting from, that I want to start sewing together. So what I also have is my button handy, because I just want to make sure that I'm making this loop the right size. So I'm just going to start out grabbing one of my needles here, and I'm kind of just holding this in place. We want to make sure that the two first GemDuos or DiamonDuos meet up equally as well. So keep hold of that. And then what I'm going to do is put my needle through further down the braid here. So leave a bit of space from where the beads start. Put the needle through the part of the braid with no beads. And obviously we can just double check. Actually, I think I just want to move it up a little bit more. And straight through there, because we can always come further down either side. So just making sure that if I'm pulling this through, that the button will fit. So keep hold of those together, and the button will still go through. Seems like a pretty good place. And then just pulling one needle through here for now. And then I like to just grab both of my needles then. So I have both of them in my hand, and then I pull my thread all the way through, because then you'll find about the midpoint of the thread, and we'll end up with fairly even lengths of thread, because we want that for the rest of the piece. Now obviously only one thread is going through here, so what I want to just do is reinforce this area a little bit. So again, grab one of your needles. Just want to make sure I'm taking correct one. There isn't a right or wrong one, but just the one that I'm working with here. And basically we just want to go back and forth through here a few times to kind of reinforce this area. And because obviously I'm using a pretty matching color in the thread, it's gonna be very close to invisible, really. It's gonna blend in really nicely, so it's not gonna really stand out or anything. So I'm going back and forth here a few times. And then obviously we want to make sure we start to pull this pretty nice and tight. So the two braids there, or the same braid, but the two parts of it stay nice and close together. So just do this until we have this nice and secure, and again keep making sure we can move up and down a little bit here, this area. Just keep making sure that that loop stays the size that fits the button there. And then also make sure we don't go too close to the beads here, because we need a little bit of space between this section and where the GemDuos start. So now we have the loop in place there. Then it's time to move on and do the rest of the bracelet. So we're going to start to put these GemDuos together to create the pattern. And basically I'm going to be working with the needles on both sides there alongside each other. So just start with one side. Doesn't matter where you start. So I'm just going to start on the top here. Now what I'm going to do is from this point where I connected the braid and kind of that connection point that creates a loop, I'm going to move down one side with one needle and then down the other side with the other needle. So we're going to obviously have one needle on either side. So I'm just going to go back and forth through the braid to do that. But obviously now only on one side with the needle that I'm working with. So this one here I'm just using for this upper side, you could say. Going back and forth basically to come down and reach the first GemDuo. So just pull the thread through, and obviously these beads are sticking out, so you probably will get tangled up on them here and there. So just kind of do it gently so we make sure to avoid the tangles, or if they show up we can just undo them. Now what I'm going to do then is I want to start, obviously I will need to get to the GemDuos, but I want to start kind of getting to the point where I can actually put my needles through the beads. So what I'm going to do is, my needle or thread is currently on the outside. I'm going to go back through and then come to the inside, and I'm going to make sure my needle is coming out literally right next to the GemDuo there, but on the, in this case where I'm looking at it, it's the right side, but it's kind of on the inside, you could say, between the beads, because that then puts me in a position to then take my needle and actually go through the hole of the GemDuo. Now this is the hole that already has the cord through in the braid, so I'm going through that and kind of coming away from the beads now with my needle and thread, and then I'm going to go in the opposite direction through the next hole, so kind of the inside hole, you could say, because it's going to be the inside once they're all collected together. So the thread is going to kind of lay along the edge of the bead, come through that hole, and now we can go through from there the other GemDuos. Now remember the groups, so 3 GemDuos in a group here, so I'm gonna, the first one I've gone through, I'm gonna go through the next one again in the inner hole, you could say. Again, the inner, because once they're connected together, it's going to be the very inner part of the star. So all these basically holes in the beads that haven't been used. So if you can see there, I've got my thread going through all those holes. And then, remember, it's the group of 3, so it's just these 3 beads for right now. For this last one, the third one, I'm going to go back through the hole with the cord and the braid, again in the opposite direction. So same principle as the first one, which means the thread is going to then end up laying along the side of the bead. And for now it's still a little bit loose, but that's fine. Then to get back to the braid, I'm going to take my needle literally right next to the bead on this same side where the thread is coming out, and go straight through to the opposite side, and then just pull the thread all the way through, because then what we're going to be able to do is pull this tight, and it's going to start collecting the beads together. So you can see there, and then kind of get the impression of what's going to be the center. So that's the 3 beads on this side here. Now what I want to do then is just kind of secure this in place, and I'm going to do that by using the same thread and needle, and just go back and forth through the braid a few times in this area. So it's just going to more securely hold. Just untangle that little knot there. Hold these beads in this position, and it's not going to keep kind of pulling apart. So make sure it's pulled tight together, and then just, like I said, go back and forth a few times here. And then the last one I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure that I've got my needle coming out literally right next to that final, the last of the 3 GemDuos, but on the other side than before, so kind of on the outside here, just so it's ready and in position for the next step with this thread. So just like that, coming out right next to the GemDuo, and then we can take it right through that hole in the GemDuo. Again, the one that has the cord from the braid, because we still need to get back into the center, but we need to do the other side first before we can do that. So again, just to make sure to avoid tangles here, and then pull the thread through. And then my thread is coming out of the kind of outer hole in that GemDuo there. And I'm just going to now then put this to the side, this thread and needle, try and get it out of the way so we don't get too tangled up with this one. Now that we're going to move to the other side here. So basically, if you maybe can be able to tell, is I'm starting out by doing one side at a time, and then what we're going to do, because on this side I'm going to do the same thing, bring the group of three together, and then we're going to connect the two sides together afterwards. So on this side, same principle. I need to work my way first of all towards that first GemDuo. So a bit at a time, and remember here we need to get to kind of the inside of the bead. So I'm just working my way down and then put my needle through to get to, so it comes out right next to the bead there, but kind of on the inside, so between the two GemDuos. Because I can then take my needle straight through the hole with the cord in, exactly the same as we did on the other side. Now obviously we're just working on this side of the bracelet, and then go to the outer, or inner rather, hole that hasn't been used for anything yet in the opposite direction, so the thread ends up along the side of the bead there. And then straight on from that first bead, working with those three beads in the group, straight through the next bead and the third bead as well in the holes that haven't been used. Pull the thread through, and obviously if we pull tight we can see that's going to bring them together. But first of all, I just want to then bring my needle through the other hole in this third bead, the one that has cord going through from the braid, to then be able to come back out to the braid. So again, straight through the braid, literally right next to the bead. And then once we've done that, same principle as the other side. Before kind of moving on, I just want to secure this in place with the beads being tight together, and then you can see we have the two halves that when we then put together it's going to create the final kind of star there. So again, just go back and forth here a few times to secure them in place. And then when you secure it in place, make sure your needle comes out right next to that third bead on the outside of it. Pull the thread through, because then I'm going to bring the needle through the hole in the bead that already has the cord through. If you remember, that's what we did on the first side there, to basically get the thread into the exact same position on this side. Get tangled in the GemDuos along the way and then pull it tight. And there we go. We now have both sides in the exact same position, and you can see the effect we're going to get. So now the aim is to connect the two sides together. So again, it doesn't matter what side you start with, because obviously they're in the same position. But what I'm then going to do is take my needle, and then from that outer hole with the cord in, I'm going to go through the inner hole in the bead, so the opposite one, in the opposite direction there. So again, this thread ends up sitting along the edge of the bead, and then straight away from here, because obviously we need to follow the direction that the thread is in, I'm going to start going through again all the inner holes in all the beads now, basically go around in order to connect the two sides together. So I'm going straight to the opposite side, and now only using the inner holes while doing this. Again, inner, because once they're connected it's going to be the inner ones in the star. So just go through one bead at a time here. And the third one in this group on the other side. And then go back to the side where this thread is coming from, because right now we only have thread going between the bottom two there. Then obviously we need the top one as well. Go through that, and then just same principle, just go through one bead at a time here. Go through the next one, and then we're basically back down to that first bead that we started from. And now what we want to do is, because going through just once here I personally don't feel is strong enough, so what I want to do is go through this a couple of times. Obviously we're still going to use the other side as well, but I like to just go around at least one more time. And before I do, I just want to now start pulling this tight though, because obviously we don't want to end up it being loose and then not be able to pull it tight together. So just make sure to pull it tight so we get that final star shape. But then otherwise I'm just going to continue in the same path I just did. So basically do another go around, just to reinforce the whole path a bit more. And then once I've gone around a couple of times, then I'm ending up on the same side where this thread originally came from, so just obviously opposite to the other one that we haven't used. And what I like to do is basically we need to just get back to the braid. I kind of like to do that through using the middle of the three beads on this side here. It doesn't really matter where you do it. All that can matter and affect it is going through some of the holes can maybe get, depending how many times you've gone through them with a thread and needle now, can get tighter. So it might be a bit difficult going through some of them, especially the ones that already have some cord through. So that's why I'm kind of just choosing a different bead to go through to avoid that problem. But again, then just coming through that bead in one direction and then going through the other hole in that same bead in the opposite direction to make it back towards the braid. And then that thread just goes along the side of the bead, and then same principle, bring the needle right next to the bead there, straight through the braid to the outside of it. And then just pull everything nice and tight. And then we've done the one side basically. And while I've got this needle, I might as well just kind of move my way down into position for the next step. And again, this is also then back and forth through the braid, going to secure the whole thing in place. So basically making my way down the braid here. Just back and forth through the braid. And the aim is to come down basically just after these GemDuos beads, a bit further down. So we're going to end up in the area between the groups of GemDuos beads there. Because what I'm also going to do there, once I've done the other thread and needle as well, is actually connect them together. So I might as well just get this into position for that. So just moving down the braid. And then just getting it to the outside for now. Something a bit like that. Avoid any knots and tangles. Pull it all the way through. And then I'm just going to leave this thread here kind of hang out. Make sure to put it out of the way to try and avoid it getting tangled up with the other one, because I've done the job with this side and now I'm just going to basically do the same thing with the other side. So I'm going to pick up that needle and same principle. I just want to basically reinforce this a bit more using this thread as well. So this is coming through the outer hole in that bead, so I want to go through the same bead in the opposite hole though, and in the opposite direction. Just like that. So we get to the inside holes in all these GemDuos beads in this little star that we've collected now. And same principle, just following that path. So using all those inside holes in all the beads. Just do one bead at a time. And just reinforcing it. So again, go around here a couple of times. And then once you're done going around and reinforcing with this thread, just like the other side, I'm ending up by that middle bead on this side where the thread originally came from. And then I'm just going to go back through the other hole in that same bead in the opposite direction, with the aim of basically getting back to the braid. So straight through the braid there, right next to the bead. So first of all, we can strengthen and secure this in place, but obviously we also get to the braid, so we can now move our way down. So just like before, I'm going to just go back and forth the braid here and basically get the thread and needle into position for the next step, so in that same area down here. So now we reach that point there and we have both threads obviously on either the side, but in this area here. So what I'm going to do now is basically connect these two braids together just like we did up here to create the loop, but obviously we just want to make sure the spacing is correct. So what I like to do personally is obviously end up in about the middle there, but kind of put these next two GemDuos together, how they're going to sit just like they do up here, and kind of hold them in place with my fingers and then push the braids together just to kind of see exactly where that midpoint is, because we want to obviously bring it together, but we do need to have just a little bit of space. We don't want to tighten it up too close to the GemDuos because that will kind of push it a bit out of place. As you can see, just like in the beginning there, we just need to have a little bit of space. So just pick one of your needles to begin with, doesn't matter which one. And then I'm going to go through the braid here on one side, but I'm going to go through the other one as well. So straight through like that, all the way to the opposite side. Just make sure I don't get my tangles. Pull the thread all the way through, and obviously it's going to then start closing up those two braids. And it's the same principle now. I'm just going to use the same thread and needle, go back and forth a few times in this area to secure it in place, so we're going to not be able to keep kind of pulling the braids apart from each other. Just get untangled from those GemDuos there. So like that, pulling it tight, and basically, like I said, go back and forth several times using the thread and needle, and then put that to the side once you've done that. I also like to make sure I use the other thread and needle as well to go back and forth. And then You can also kind of move up and down a little bit to kind of tighten up the braids a bit closer to the GemDuos if that's needed. So basically do that. So basically now we've finished the very first little star there. And from now on it's just the same. We've also done that connection point, which means the threads are now in position again on either side there to make their way towards the next group of GemDuos that's going to create the next star there when we bring them together. So that's all we want to do now, is basically keep repeating. So with one thread at a time, work towards the first GemDuo there, bring them together, first the one side then the other side, and then bring the two sides together by connecting them in the middle, and then connect the two braids after that star, and then basically just keep repeating until we have all the GemDuos connected into our stars. So now I made it all the way to the other end here. You can see I've got all my stars in place and complete. So basically now what we just got to do is finish this off, and of course add our button as well. So on this end, obviously I just need to connect the two braids just like I've done before and after all the stars otherwise. So I'm just gonna do that on this end here as well. Again, starting with the one thread, and then I'm going to use the other one as well just to secure it nicely. So go back and forth through here a few times, just like we did between all the stars. So now this area is nice and secure. It's time to add in the button. So in this case here, I've got this heart-shaped one, and we have the loop on the back. So what I'm going to do is that loop I'm going to put down between the two braids, obviously in the direction that I want the button to sit, and push it all the way up to where I won't go any further. So it's going to sit right after where we connected the two braids here. Now the hole is then sitting in between the two braids. It's going around the sides there, and then what I'm going to do is use that hole to attach the button, also using my needles here. So I'm just going to hold it in place for now, and then I'm going to obviously move further down to where the button is sitting, and then I want to make sure that the needle, when I'm going through to the other side, is actually coming through the button. Now it can be easier to flip this around and actually then work on the back. Just get everything around and not get tangled up, so we can kind of more see what we're doing here. Make sure we grab that hole in the button and then pull this through. And basically I just want to go through like this several times, first of all with this thread, but then obviously the other thread as well. And that's how I'm going to be attaching the button here, and it's going to sit nicely right on the end. Now I want to make sure I'm going to be going through this quite a few times to make it as strong and secure as possible. So I'm literally going back and forth, making sure I catch that hole, because that's what's going to keep the button in place. And obviously durability wise over time as well. Go through many times to make sure it's not going to kind of wear and break and the button will fall off. So just keep doing this, and obviously when you've done this one, also do it with the other thread as well. And then when the button's in there nice and securely, that is not budging out of the way at all. So I'm happy with how the button is. Then I'm going to just move down below the button here and also attach the braids together, just to kind of make the connection point here between the braids even stronger. So literally just below that hole or the loop in the button. Same principle, go back and forth several times, and also with both threads and needles. Then once the button's caged fully in place, and I've used both threads here, I like to finish it off by kind of making a little end on this. So I'm just starting with one thread, and I've gone through several times in the braids, and then I'm just going to use a thread here to wrap around both braids literally in this area that I've just gone through. And I'm kind of pulling it a bit tight as well. So you can see we're kind of creating a little end with the thread. And just kind of do that a few times. And then I'm just going to hold onto it and grab the needle again, because obviously if we just let this go it's going to unravel. So I'm taking the needle and going through the braids again, right where this thread is wrapping around. And because it's getting a bit tight, it can be beneficial to use some pliers here, because you get a much better grip on the needle. I'm pulling it through the other side, and then as I pull this, it's gonna pull all the way through to the point where I can let go of the thread, and obviously it will then stay in place. So that's the one thread that I've used. Now I also want to start finishing off the thread here, because we don't need to use it anymore. So this thread that I've just used to wrap around, I can finish off. So what I like to do is, again for security, once I've done the wrap here, just go back and forth through the braid a couple of times. Doesn't hurt, that only adds the extra security to it. And make sure it's all nice and tight. Just get that other thread out of the way. Just gonna, I think, go through one more time to the other side. And then I just want to finish off this thread. So I'm just going to do that by kind of staying on this side and just choosing somewhere, kind of coming through some of the thread and cord. Something a bit like that, very close to where the thread is actually coming out from. Now I'm not going to pull this all the way tight, I'm going to make sure I've left a little loop there, and then I'm going to take my needle through the loop once and twice in the same direction, so the thread is basically looping around itself but within that loop that we left. And then now I'm going to pull it tight, and that then creates a little knot. And again, we don't want to then just cut off this thread right where this knot is. We want to just move away from it, because if you cut off the thread right where the knot is, it's going to be likely to come undone. So I always want to cut off the thread away from the knot. So again, you can literally go back and forth here a couple of times. Now it's up to you if you want to make a couple of knots with each of these threads, then just do the exact same thing that I showed you and make sure to go through the braids a few times then before you cut off the excess of the thread. What you can also do, for instance, is add a little bit of glue to the knots, just a tiny little bit. That will add extra security, but really it is going to be strong enough here. So finish off with this thread if you want to do a couple of knots, and then of course we just want to pick up the other thread and do the same again. Wrap this around a few times and then finish off, make a few knots, and then get rid of the excess thread. So now all that's left to do is get rid of the excess of the braids here on the ends, because obviously they're just kind of flapping about now. So because I'm using synthetic cords, what I'm going to do is first of all cut off the excess here. Now if you're using natural cords or you just prefer to use glue, then what you can do is just kind of glue the ends and then cut off the excess. But I'm going to cut off excess of the braid, but make sure I leave a little bit of the cords there, so I'm not cutting right up against the thread that I wrapped. I want to leave a little bit, cut straight across both of them, so like that, get rid of the ends. And then, like I said, because I'm using synthetic cord here, I'm going to take a lighter and then singe the ends, so basically melt them down. Now obviously be careful because it's a naked flame and it does get hot, but because it's synthetic cord I can do this where I'm just carefully, obviously, kind of melting the ends here, and then I usually use the lighter itself to kind of push things down. And what that does is it seals all the cords in place. I'm just doing it a little at a time here, and it just kind of creates a more tidy and neat end. So basically just getting rid of the cords and, like I said, securing them by more or less melting them together. So then once this end is finished off, we have our button securely in place that we can then use for our loop on the other end that's already in place. And then we have our finished bracelet, and it looks a little something like that, and you get your stars going all the way around your wrist, and it's also nice and comfortable to wear because obviously this is made with cord. So if you enjoy kumihimo, I've got loads of other tutorials on my channel, so make sure to check that out. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching this one. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.